Hello YouTubers and followers. Thank you guys so much for clicking on this video. I'm very glad that you did. I wanted to discuss when a cryptic baby stops growing. Excuse me. Moving beyond the cryptic pregnancy. So first, I just want to let you know the reason why I'm asking these questions is not to mock or to try to humiliate or embarrass or I'm not asking these questions for any negative reasons. The reasons why I ask these questions is in hopes that they will inspire somebody to hopefully come forward with trying to figure out the answers to these questions and start a medical study that we can start to figure out the answers to these questions, because some of these questions, when you ask them, you'll be very, very anxious to hear the answer. Although I don't have any answers to any of these questions, they're all just questions because there is no scientific or medical study on a 2 to 7 year cryptic pregnancy and how it's possible or if it's possible. So let's get started. When a cryptic baby stops growing, does it also stop moving, or does it continue the functions that it's able to do, or does it just float there lifeless until it starts to grow again? And how does this exchange happen? What about brain activity when it stops growing? Does the brain still continue to function? What if it has stopped growing halfway through growing the brain? What is the brain doing while it's not growing? And how does it continue to grow, pick up right where it left off without any negative effects? How does the heart function during periods of no growth of this cryptic baby? What happens to the lung function during periods of no growth of this cryptic baby? What happens to the kidney and liver function? How do these systems start and stop with the start and stop of growth? Or do these systems continue to work even while the baby isn't growing? And then how, if it hasn't fully grown an organ, how is it picking up right where it left off in growing that organ? How are these major systems continuing to function without growth for days, weeks, months, and years? What about range of motion? Being confined in a very small space for 2 to 7 years has to affect how the baby moves outside of the womb. Being confined for 2 to 7 years in utero, does this affect the way the baby grows inside of the mother's uterus? And how is it different for cryptic babies in a cryptic pregnancy compared to a standard baby in a standard pregnancy? If you think about it, in a standard pregnancy, the baby feels, when it gets to a certain size and it starts to put on weight. And this happens from 32 weeks until the due date of 40 weeks. So this baby starts to put on more and more weight, so it starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger. As it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, the space within the uterus gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So it starts to feel it's tighter in there because it's a bigger baby. So this happens towards the end of the pregnancy. In a standard pregnancy, that's about 7 weeks, 6 to 7 weeks, where the baby can possibly feel really, really tight inside of the uterus. But it usually, it takes a little while for the baby to put on weight. So it's usually the last month, 4 weeks, that you can really start to feel that the baby isn't moving as much as it used to because there's just not enough space. In a cryptic pregnancy, this has to be a lot different because it's 2 to 7 years, even up to 10 years. So yes, this baby is growing slowly. So it's not going to feel confined for the full 7 years of the pregnancy, but it is going to feel like it's growth, like the room is getting much smaller, at least for 9 months towards the end of their cryptic pregnancy, if not a little bit longer, possibly even a year and 8 or a year and a half, so 18 months, that the baby will be putting on weight towards the end of the pregnancy. So this has to affect the way the baby grows if it's inside of the uterus for that amount of time. If it's just a regular baby, the women who say that they deliver a regular, normal, healthy baby, how is this regular, normal, healthy baby inside of the uterus for 2 to 7 years, and it doesn't affect the way the baby moves? I've asked about this earlier, but I'm going to repeat it again. What about the discontinuation of growth during an important and complicated process, such as the growth of an eyeball, the growth of the brain, maybe even the growth of the eardrum? There's so many other different processes that are very, very important within the body. How can it just stop growing during something so important? And then if it does and it starts growing again, how is it growing without, how is it continuing to grow once the baby starts growing again without any complications? So what human mechanism, hold on. Okay. What human mechanism is responsible for this discontinuation and continuation of growth? What is deciding when it should grow and when it shouldn't grow? Does the discontinuation of growth happen randomly, or is it the fetus who's responsible for this decision into stopping growth, or is it the mother's body making this decision and stopping growth of the baby, or is it the fetus and mother working together? If so, how is this communication happening? How is this communication happening between the mother and the fetus in order for, you know, is it just the baby that's deciding that it should stop growing? Is it the mother's body that's deciding that it should stop growing the baby? How does that work? Or is it the mother and the baby who are deciding that the baby should stop growing for so period of time? And how does that communication work? Is this something that is happening through the placenta? And then what happens to the placenta during periods of no or slow growth? How is it staying, if baby isn't growing, how is the placenta staying healthy? What happens to the placenta during periods of no growth? So how is the placenta staying healthy during these times? And does the baby continue to eat or take nutrients from the placenta during periods of no growth? And if it is continuing to take in nutrients, what is it doing with this nutrients? Because it's not growing, so how is it storing it? Where is it putting it? Is it like reserving it in order for the time when it does start to grow again? And then how does all that work? So does those exchange between mother and placenta also stop while the baby isn't growing? Or see, now, does the amniotic fluid get replaced every 3 to 4 hours during a cryptic pregnancy? Because during a standard pregnancy, the amniotic fluid gets replaced every 3 to 4 hours. That is why women who are pregnant often say that they are very, very thirsty, because they're helping to replace this amniotic fluid. So, does this happen during periods of no growth? If the baby isn't growing, is the amniotic fluid getting replaced? And if it is, why? And if it isn't, how is it not getting replaced? Because then it would be filled with toxins. Unless the baby, if it's not growing, then all its systems would have to shut down in order to not fill the amniotic fluid up with waste, so that it wouldn't have to replace it every 3 to 4 hours. How does the amniotic fluid stay healthy during periods of no growth? When the baby decides not to grow for weeks, months, or years? How does the mother's system keep up with hormone distribution and waste excretion during a 2 to 7 year, sometimes 10-year pregnancy, when the baby is not growing? How is the mother able to keep up with this? If baby isn't growing, then what is it doing? It's known that an embryo's survival is directly affected by growth. So without growth, the embryo dies. At what point does this change happen when the embryo grows into a fetus? During a cryptic pregnancy, can the embryo also start and stop growth? Or is it just the fetus or the cryptic baby itself that can make itself start and stop growth? Is there a difference between embryos? Or does a cryptic pregnancy and a standard pregnancy, do they both start out with the same kind of embryo? Or does a cryptic pregnancy have a completely different kind of embryo than a standard pregnancy? And if so, this is something we can easily study in a clinical setting. Does a cryptic pregnancy actually have its own type or classification of embryo in order to develop into a cryptic baby and cryptic pregnancy? This is something we can easily answer in a clinical setting. One of my questions that really I didn't come up with until I started thinking about these group of questions was this. If you have twins, can you have one be a cryptic baby and the other be a standard baby? So let's say they're twins, but they're fraternal twins. So this means that the mother ovulated 2 eggs during one cycle. Both of these eggs were fertilized. One was a cryptic embryo, one was a standard embryo. So one developed into a cryptic baby and the other developed into a standard baby. Can this happen? Is this a possibility? Does anybody know who's experienced this? Can one baby grow normally and the other cryptic baby stop and start growth simultaneously during the same pregnancy? Is this possible? Has anybody experienced this? And then another group of questions that continues to boggle my mind is, how can a woman have one or several standard pregnancies, normal regular pregnancies that show up on tests immediately, and then go on to develop a cryptic pregnancy with a cryptic baby? What changed between her standard pregnancies and her cryptic baby, or her cryptic pregnancy? What's changed between those in order to make this baby cryptic? Why weren't all her babies cryptic? What was different when she had her standard pregnancies versus now that she's having her cryptic pregnancy? And these are the group of questions that boggle me the most, because I get so many women who message me saying, I'm a mother of 5. All those pregnancies showed up on tests immediately. There was no doubt in our mind. I got confirmed with all 5 pregnancies, but I know that I'm having a cryptic pregnancy right now. So what has changed? What's different from then to now? And that's something that only the women themselves can answer, because they only know the answer to that question. What has changed in your life? What's changed in, just in general, overall? And these are questions that we should start asking, because if we start getting answers to these questions, even theories to these questions, then that starts opening up a line of communication about this. Instead of looking at it as a joke or something to mock for the people who don't believe, think of it as something to investigate, something to educate somebody about. The only way to educate somebody about something is to thoroughly research it and then present the information you're finding in a non-biased, non-judgmental way. And I'm trying to ask these questions to get an open dialogue between believers, non-believers, supporters, visitors. It doesn't matter. People who come across this online, you know, they become interested in it, they start looking into it, and then, you know, they come up with their own belief or their own judgment of it. They either believe in it and they think it's possible, or they don't believe in it and they don't think it's possible. But it's always tempting to make fun of people who you think don't make sense. Let's try to put this as sweet as possible. It's very tempting to make fun of people who you think don't make sense. They don't make sense to you, so you want to make fun of them. That's not helping them. That's not helping you. It's not helping either party to make fun of somebody. If there's a reason why you don't agree with something, you should always try to educate them and why you don't agree. Just pointing at them and laughing is not going to get anybody anywhere. All that does is offend them, makes them mad. They basically do this, and then they don't care what you have to say because they think you're stupid or you're crazy, and you think they're stupid or they're crazy, and you're trying to correct them. And you know, sometimes you just gotta let them be. Sometimes people just believe what they believe, and that's fine. It's their life. It's their choice. It is ultimately their decision what they believe. I'm not here to change anybody's mind. I'm not here to argue with anybody. I'm here to present questions. I'm here to research. I'm here to find out information. I'm here to gather information. If you want to answer some of these questions for me, I please welcome any questions, any answers, anything and everything. I welcome debate. I welcome open conversation. I welcome open discussion. I'm very open to learning something new. So I hope this video helps somebody. I hope some of these questions do inspire somebody to, you know, ask other cryptic 2 to 7 year cryptic pregnancy members some of these questions as well, and see if maybe anybody has any ideas about some of the answers to these questions. If you have any questions for me, please leave them in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you're well. I hope you're healthy. Stay blessed. Bye.